Oi you, it's time for another episode of Dorothy and the Dealer. Let's tune into the conversation.
So, how are you going?
Good, I'm lovely.
Are you? I
Yeah.
can tell. You're so lovely. It's a bit cold today. I can feel like you're all rugged up.
I am definitely jacketed up. I don't like the cold. Not a big cold fan.
I know. So, the reason we're on our podcast today is we're going to talk about kids.
Oh, right.
Have you got a song?
I don't, but I hear you have
Well,
one.
I think we've done it before, but I'm going to sing it anyway. I'm a bit
Okay.
excited. Ready?
Let's go.
I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense
Let it go, mate. Just go. Get into
of
it. Just
pride.
lean into it. Lean into that
Make
awkwardness.
it
It's okay.
easier.
Let
the children's laughter.
So
remind
I'll take
how
it that the theme of this
used
is
to be.
motorbike mechanics.
Oh, I just wanted to take it that next step.
There you go. You went there. It was good. That's stuck in everybody's head. now.
Oh, no, I know. Everyone's just like, oh, no, Melzy, please don't ever do that again. Anyway, so
Yeah.
we always get asked questions about kids. And so this podcast,
Yeah.
we don't even have to think about what we're going to do because we're
Great.
just answering people's
Great.
questions. I love this.
That's really
stuff.
good. So are they like surprise questions?
We have not seen them. They've been placed here. They've been covered up,
Yeah.
and I will be reading them when
Yeah.
I read them out
Yeah.
loud on the podcast for the first time.
Okay.
So we
Let's go. Let's go.
We should have probably prepared, but they didn't want to let us. Are you ready? Okay. What does it mean if you don't want kids? That's a good one to start with.
You're highly intelligent.
If you looked at your parenting reel just recently,
Yeah.
I will say it doesn't mean anything. It's not about good or bad, right or wrong.
If you don't want kids, you don't want kids. I mean,
Having said that,
there's a lot of fucking people in the world at the moment.
Yeah. Having said that, I will say that you still always have kids because you've always got a baby somewhere. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, your job is your baby, your
job,
career.
your career, your puppy,
Yeah.
your
Car.
your
Your
car.
motorbike.
Yeah, you've always got a baby somewhere. So it's okay if you don't want kids, but there are some people, I'm going to say this as well, some people don't want kids because they perceive that they're going to get it wrong or they're going to mess up or they don't want to relive their parents' experiences. And I think that it's not about wanting them or not, but I think that at the end of the day, as much as possible, you want to be able to, I don't know, sort that out. Do you know what I mean? Sort
Yeah.
out the stuff that's going on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like sort out what's actually happening, because sometimes when you do that, you actually realise that it's not about having kids or not. It's just about it was the stuff that was going on in the background.
But
don't you
people
think?
also have kids for the wrong reasons. You know, people have children because they want to be able to love something outside of themselves that they don't have enough love for themselves. So they think, if I get a child, then I'm going to be able to love. You know. So they want to have a kid because they want to be able to love the child more than they're willing to love themselves. And you know, that's a recipe in itself. I don't know what it's a recipe for, but it's a recipe in itself. And I think that people who are people want to have children as well because they feel that that's their purpose. You know, my purpose is to have children. And what can happen is that you classically become all about the child, and that's problematic, at the mercy of yourself. And it's very ingrained into society that I've got to put my children first and my family first. And they don't realise that when, that just festers into low self-worth, and then it becomes obviously a lineage of low self-worth. And we see a lot of that. Like I've had full-blown arguments with people who are like, no, your kids are number one. And then, once they understand the ramifications of that, and at first when you say to them, no, your kids should not ever be number one, ever. People think, yes, they should. But once you spell out, the actual backlash from that for a child, they suddenly very quickly change their mind, and they will normally go, geez, I never thought of it like that. I never realised that that's actually what I was doing.
Yeah.
And because it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Having a child for the purpose of filling a gap in your life, or for a purpose of you feeling some sort of sense of being capable of nurturing or loving someone, has ramifications. And then when the child turns up and you sacrifice your whole life for the child, that has terrible ramifications for the kid.
So I just want to add as well, like sometimes you're saying, what if you don't want kids? Oftentimes you hear that with people because they're at a different stage in their lives. I know that there was a time where you didn't. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I think that if you've got your stuff cleared out, if you're meant to have kids or not, it'll happen. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not about like whether that you might choose to make it happen as well, as in you might have to go down a fertility path or something like that. But it's about understanding that sometimes there's different times in your life where you're going to choose that's something that you don't want to do, and that's perfectly okay. Yeah. Perfectly okay.
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
Next one. Okay. How do you navigate when parents have different views to their kids about personal development? So that sounds like whoever's written that is saying that the parents want the kids to do work on themselves and the kids don't.
Just say it again.
How do you navigate when parents have different views to their kids about personal development? That doesn't sound like it's the parents arguing about personal. It sounds like the parent
are trying to
and the
impose
kids have different views on personal development. Yeah.
Well, I mean, generally that question comes from a situation, and I'm saying generally, where someone is making the kid out that, it's like when parents try to impose that view or that value on top of the child, you need to do some personal development, or you need to work on yourself. Generally, they should be looking in the mirror saying that stuff.
So I'm going to say, let's just backtrack a minute, right? So if we're talking about personal development, right? But we could be talking about anything, right? If a parent has a different view on a kid, right? And they want their kid, it sounds like they want their kid to do something, right? They need to talk to them in terms of their values. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
It's a values thing and it's a values clash.
Yeah.
Because I can want my kid to do dancing and he wants to play computer games. Yeah. That's a values clash.
Yeah.
I have the value on personal development.
Yeah.
The kid has the value on computer games.
Yeah.
So in order to communicate, you have to have the values conversation. Wouldn't you agree? Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that's at a basic general understanding level. But if this is with anyone, this is not a parents and kids thing, but if you are imposing your value onto somebody else, that's because you have, especially when it comes to personal development, because the personal development is about working on yourself. It's about growing. It's about understanding the measure of who you are, right? If you're trying to get somebody else to do that, that's definitely something that you need to look at within yourself.
The other thing is they're generally trying, it's common when people come out of events. I used to watch this years ago when I'd attend events. People would come out of events and they would have these great insights. But generally what would happen is at the beginning of the event, they'd say, don't make any major decisions for at least 2 weeks after attending this event. And so what would happen is, now, those sorts of events are very cathartic events. When you're hearing that sort of stuff, it's very cathartic. It's because the presenters or the event itself knows that it really only has about a 2-week effect on the person. So it's not proper transformation, it's change. And there's a difference between transformation and change. So when if you're coming out of an event and you've had this epiphany or you've had this wake up or you've had something really inspiring happen to you and you're running home to fix the family, that's a problem. Because all you will get is you're coming from I'm okay, and they'll come from, I'm not okay. So you're making them not okay. When you truly have a transformational experience, you realize there's nothing to fix. There's you realize that everything that's happening for the kid is meant to be happening for the kid. And then in that moment, you realize the best thing for you to do, is to actually be the greatest example of you that you can be and encourage them to do the same thing by whatever means possible. And what I mean by that is that whatever means possible will happen for the kid to find their way. You can't impose your way on top of their way because then there's no way for them, so you have to really stop, and you got to get that when you get there and you have proper transformation, there's nothing to fix. So that sort of that sort of question really comes from somebody who is wanting to, they want to fix the child or they want to mend the child or there's something broken in the child. I mean, I used to do it myself. I'd come out of personal development events, and I would run home and I'd be like, Mom, I know why you're so fucked up. Or I'd be like, Dad, I understand why you are the way you are. And it's like, well, fucking, my dad would look at me like I had 10 heads. What do you mean? Do you understand? I am the way I am, son, I'm a fisherman. I smell a fish. That's it.
I think that's true for any circumstance where you're trying to impose something on another human being. It doesn't matter whether it's personal development or anything else, but it's because you're thinking it's going to give you something that you don't already have. You've got to step up into your own. You've got to go find that in yourself. Your kid isn't meant to just do what it is that you love in order for you to feel okay about yourself, in order for you to feel okay about the job that you've done as a parent. If that
you feeling okay is up to you. It's not up to the kid, because the kid
and what
will
the
never,
kid does, whether the kid does personal development or not.
Even if the kid does personal development, it'll never measure up to what you need, because the issue you have is actually in you. You're hoping if they change, you'll change.
Yeah.
If they change, you'll feel something different, and the only way to not do that is to get into a state of, human transformation where you're in unconditional love, and unconditional love has no conditions on it, and you realize in that moment that there's nothing to fix in the kid, there's nothing to mend there, and that's really where you want to be coming from with your family and your kids. If you're not there, then that should be your target. Get there, and then you'll realize there's nothing to fix and nothing to mend. They'll always find their own way. There's that great statement from years ago. It was said to me by a woman named Jennifer Marr, and she said to me one day, Mitch, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And then she said to me, but you can make him thirsty. And the way in which you make him thirsty is you just talk about how you see things. And then that, when they're ready to ask questions, they'll ask. If they're never ready, it doesn't matter, because all you're doing is just being your transformed self, and you're broadcasting into your sphere of influence information with inspiration. And when you do it from an inspiring state, it's received with inspiration, and then you get inspiration back.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, the next one. How do you get kids interested in money? I think that's a very similar answer, is that you've got to lead with inspiration. You can't force anybody to do anything, right? So you've got to lead from a place of having that yourself, don't you reckon? Yeah,
for sure. And there's other practical things as well there, though. You don't, never rescue desperation financially, invest in inspiration financially. So you're best to encourage your children to do things that get them paid. You're best to say things like, okay, what do you want? I want this. Okay, well, I'll put up half, but you have to get the other half, and get the kids to think outside the square about how they can get the finances that they want to do, the things that they want to do. And kids, it happens at around about 11 or 9, around about 10 or 11. That's 9, it doesn't really happen. The brain hasn't developed enough by then. But 10, the age of about 10 is when they start to get their heads around what money is, what its value is, how it works in the world. And that's really an encouraging time. But I used to let my kids play with cash money right from when they could hold money. I hung it above their beds like a monitor. A mobile. I hung it above their beds like a mobile, and $100 notes and $50 notes. And I used to let them play with it, because money's, a form of energy exchange. It's a form of love exchange. So I think once encouraging them to love what they do and get paid for it, that's a smart move.
I think that it all comes back to values again, because you value money, you understand that, and because of that you can share from that perspective. If you are trying to make a kid value money but you don't value it, then it's not going to work. Yeah. That's happened with any conversation you have about anything with kids, right? Yeah. But so you're right. So then when you understand their values and you can communicate in terms of their values, and you can show them how their value has monetary value, then it will make a difference. Yeah. It's what you do with your kids, right? Yeah. Lexi, Lola and Oliver are great with that. They have an understanding of money and how it works, and they get
and they know how to get it.
They know how to get it. They know how to spend it. They know how to handle it. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I remember one day I was there and you had some cash, and I think it was a couple of $100 notes or whatever, and you gave it to Ollie and you said, here, that's what cash smells like. I remember you telling him to smell it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just having that understanding, not being afraid of it, just actually, but you have to lead the way with that.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many clever little ways these days of kids being able to earn money, you know, and they should, you know, you encourage your kids. You know, my kids were earning. You know, I set them to work I set Ollie to probably Lola and Lexi a little bit earlier than Ollie, but I set Lola and Lexi to work at about 3 or 4. That's when I set them to work. And what I mean by that is they were given jobs and they had to do their jobs. And, you know, there was reward for doing them and there was reprimand for not. And they understood that. And it was congruent with what was important to them and what their values were, which I think at the time was most likely lollies, you know, or, you know, being able to buy, for Lexi or Lola, it's always been makeup and oils.
Being
and
able to
buy things that she loves, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important question, though. I love that question.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay, next question. When do you know something is a want for a kid versus a part of their values? That it's a want. So how do you differentiate between a want and a value? That Lola wants this, but it's actually, or that it's Lola values this.
Well, I think when a kid wants something, want is very primitive. You know, it's a very primitive reaction. So when a kid wants something, they'll act primitively. When they value something, they'll act with appreciation, and you'll see them love what it is. So, you know, kids, I want it. You have to. The language language is, you know, a form of manifestation, because what we speak about, we bring about. So if you monitor what they're saying and the emotion behind it, I want this. You know, if my kid goes to me, Dad, I really want this, I'd say to them, well, tell me why. Why do you want it? Sell it to me. Pitch it to me. Why do you want it?
I definitely agree with that part.
And then if I can get them into their heart, if they go into their heart and they can tell me why they would love to have something, then that's fine. But if they're just like, if they don't know and they're just going, I just want it, well, then they're just looking for immediate gratification, which will cost. And it'll cost them, because when you respond to an emotion, I remember watching a great piece years ago where a kid's dog had gone missing and the parents put up a reward, and somebody came back with the dog, and the parents had the kid there, and they said, oh, well, we want a reward. So they handed over the dog, and they knew in that moment that the person who was handing over the dog had stolen the animal. And what they handed over the dog and they handed over money, and what happened for that kid in that moment is that the kid learned that crime pays. If I commit a crime, I can pay. So we are learning those things at a very early age. We are learning you have to be able to navigate, and if they cannot answer you from their hearts being open and them feeling like really humbled and really able to articulate to you in terms of their values why that's important to them, then you shouldn't be answering demand.
I think that at the age that your kids are, they're able to do that, and I agree with that. That's also been a part of your parenting and the style. And I think what I've been teaching even before I was doing this work is that you've got to communicate with kids. Kids, just because they're little people, it doesn't mean that they're like smaller versions. It doesn't mean they don't have their values. It doesn't mean that they don't have things that are important to them. And so treating them with the respect that you would want to be treated around your values is important, right? So I think that the more that you can get kids to communicate to you in terms of their values and vice versa is important. But what would you say to someone who, how would you know a want versus a value from a young age? And like before they can articulate, because you've got to get them to a point where they can articulate. And if you have been a parent that hasn't given them the opportunity to articulate, then perhaps there will be more screaming and shouting and stuff like that. Would you agree or not?
Well, when kids are under pressure, like adults, they revert to cellular memory, so they act primitively. So they revert back to that developmental stage between 1 and 8 years old. So you know, when a kid is wanting for something and they're 18 months old, you know, and they're throwing a SPAC attack and they can't communicate properly, and you have to be able to navigate and you'll know. I mean, you know when to go, no, you're not having any more of that. You've had some. That's it. I understand, hon, and hug them and hold them and let them know. Let them get the SPAC attack out, but it doesn't mean that you try to quieten them down by giving them.
I agree with that.
Right.
I agree with that. But there's like Lola. She had a thing. She wouldn't leave the house unless her hair was done. You didn't get that because Lexi wasn't like that. Do you know what I mean? But Lola had even as a baby, she had a voice enough for you to know, because even before she could walk or speak, this thing was important to her. It was always important to her. So it was like you need to be able to read that then.
I mean, we 7% of what we communicate is verbal, 38% is vocal, 54% of what we're communicating is body language. So you'll know from their body language that it is important to them. You'll feel it. No, this is important to me. You know, I have to stand in the mirror and brush my hair. It's important to me. And Lola did that.
Yeah.
You know, so we worked out, okay, Lola's hair.
It wasn't just a temper tantrum about not getting a lolly. She was serious that she did not want to leave.
Yeah, and you'll know if you're being
if you're tuned in.
Well, if you're unfair, you know when you're being unfair. If you're rushed or, come on, we need to leave the house, we need to get out, what are you doing? You'll know that you're not being patient and unfair, and they will test your patience. Your children are here to get you to evolve. They are your teachers. You know, we're all just kids in an adult body, but they are your teachers. They're here to get you to evolve. Your objective is to be able to navigate when you're being unfair or when you're being emotional, and don't meet their emotion with emotion. You know, just don't do that. Stabilize yourself and be able to communicate with them, and just take a minute. If it takes you 2 minutes to brush your hair, so what?
Yeah. Okay, we've got quite a few questions to get through, so I'm going to keep going. Next one. How do you help motivate kids at school when they find it boring? I think key word here is motivate, right? So how do you motivate kids at school when they find it boring?
Well, why don't you have a shoot at this one?
Well, I think that the answer there is in the key word, which is motivating. Motivating is an external, you're needing external gratification. You need to do it because it's of some sort of external thing. I think what your key here is to help inspire them. And inspiration is a different energy altogether. Inspiration comes from within rather than from without. So pushing your kids to go to school if they're finding it boring, and making it a forceful thing instead of communicating and figuring out how it is aligned with their values and how you can inspire them. Now, at some levels, and for some kids and for some situations, sometimes that is a process of actually moving them out of one school, putting them into another, because of the way that you're seeing that the kids are being taught. Do you know what I mean? Or how they're behaving in that particular environment, as happened with Lexi, with when she was younger. But I think that as if you've got an older kid and you want to be understanding, I think that the key here is really understanding your kids' values and really understanding how to communicate to your child in terms of their values, and really setting the expectation right from an early age that they do that. So you talking to your kid, you saying before about sell it to me, that's about them communicating in terms of values. Now, when they know their values, then you can talk to them and use those values and use that as an inspiration.
But then they also learn, in them communicating back to you like that, they also learn how to communicate from their values.
Correct.
And so they learn to speak from their heart a lot, and then so that's a very inspiring thing, and the world reacts to that. But if you're not, just read the question again.
How do you motivate your kids at school when they find it boring?
Okay, so if you don't align what they find boring with their values, it can, So one of the things to do is to work out what they're doing and ask them how that benefits their values. And when you work out what they don't like doing and how it benefits their values, they suddenly realize, shit, I don't want to not do that anymore. It's only because they can't see the link between what they're doing and how that helps them fulfill their values. So it's a great little exercise just to ask them, okay, what is it you don't like doing? Okay, and understand what their values are, and be able to communicate to them, okay, do you see then? Tell me how you doing that helps you with your values. And at first you'll go, Jesus, I don't know how. I don't even see it, but it will always appear. It'll always be there. And they'll be like, okay, I get it.
How does maths help you with your hair, Lola?
Yep. How does it help you with your hair?
With your hair. Okay. What would your advice be? What would your advice be to first-time parents in terms of money and not passing on your traumas? Very cool. So, in terms of money...
It's a double question, really.
Okay. So, in terms of money, I think we've kind of answered that in the previous question in terms of getting your kids interested in money.
Yeah.
But in terms of money with the kids, My recommendation is just do what you did, which was talk about it, use it, get them to use it, get them to understand its value, not be afraid of it. Money is just energy currency. It does not have moral value in and of itself. And so the reason that people are afraid of it is because they perceive that it's either more plus than minus or more minus than plus, or they're going to be perceived a certain way if they have those types of conversations with kids. I think you just need to be really upfront, and you need to do all of those things we spoke about earlier, right? In terms of not passing on your traumas, so the key with that for me is that firstly, if you recognise them as traumas, then you haven't dealt with them to the degree that you could in order for you to not pass them on. So when you're labelling something as a trauma, it's because you're seeing it as more minus than plus.
Correct.
Now, I'm not taking away the fact that that happened to you and it would have been hard and distressing at the time. I'm not saying that. But if we're labelling it that way and we're not labelling it as a blessing, then we haven't seen the true blessing in it. So the only thing, if we're not clear with what's happened to us, we will either try and run away from it or run towards it in our parenting. Do you know what I mean? So we'll either try and be more like somebody or less like somebody. We'll be running away or to certain things. And as a result of that, your kids are going to pick up that energy. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the person that you're trying to run away from is the person you'll end up becoming. If you've got an issue with how mummy parented you and you're not clear with that, then you'll do everything you can in your life to not be that, but you'll end up running into that at some level.
You know, this world is, I mean, we're master manipulators. That's what we are. Mm-hmm. This world is made of energy. And we create our world, and our objective is to manipulate the energy. It's to mold the energy in accordance with what we want to do. So we manipulate and mold energy all the time, and that energy creates our world. Mm. The tools that we use to manipulate and mold energy to create our world are important to us. But if they only become a tool when we understand what shaped them, how we got them, when we're appreciative of the circumstances and situations that allowed us to get them, that's when we become experts with those tools. And if we act primitively and we live in the land of, I was traumatized, trauma is just an inability for a human being to stop and look at what occurred and grab the blessings out of them so that they can manipulate the energy of the world and create a better world.
I really like that. I haven't really heard you say it in that way before. Yeah, I really like that.
So I think
it's a toolbox. That whatever happened provided you with all the tools that you need.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if you stand there pointing at the toolbox and being pissed off at it, you're not opening it and looking and realizing that and you have a higher self, and your higher self is relying on you. You have a higher spiritual self, and your higher spiritual self is relying on you to pass the lessons. Mm-hmm. And when you're emotional, it's because the higher self hasn't got the lesson. Mm-hmm. So therefore, nothing that occurred for you has not been a part of your responsibility, and nothing that has occurred for you has ever occurred for you for no reason. And we get emotional not because of what occurred, but because we can't see the reason in why it occurred, and therefore we're not picking up the tools, and our world is not turning out the way we wanted it to.
So, how do you not pass on traumas then?
Well, the key is to just love whatever.
Not call it a trauma.
And it's not okay. I'm not going to call it a trauma.
It's not about not saying the word. It's about literally not that word not coming up when you think about that scenario.
And you're traumatized because you don't get it. You're traumatized. The trauma is an emotional reaction. It's energy in motion. E equals mc squared. It's energy in motion. You're traumatized because you're emotional. And if you get grateful, you'll no longer be emotional. And that's when your genius awakens. That's when the true author, the true, creator actually wakes up inside of you, is when you stop and look at what happened and realize it was just equipping you and tooling you to be able to go and do what you love. Now, for fuck's sake, can you just get on and do what it is you're here to do?
I think that it might sound to some people. It might sound to some people that it's callous and caring.
No,
but I feel like
what's callous is asking a person to spend their lives feeling fucking traumatized.
Exactly.
That's what's callous.
And I think that, but based on the fact that we've worked with people over 20 years now, almost 20 years, and actually taken people who have perceived what has happened to them as trauma and turned that around into their greatest blessing. And people, like, this is not about making what happened right. It's not about making it happen wrong. It's about saying, this happened. Now what are you going to do? How are you going to live the rest of your life? Are you going to let that be the thing that weighs you down, or are you going to let that be the thing that lifts you up? And if you can do that in your life and you can understand all of the tools that you got as a result of that, then you can then pass that on to your kids.
Yeah.
And then there is no... our kids are designed to live out our unfulfilled
dreams
and aspirations, right? So the greater you dream and the greater the greater the kid has a chance to be able to do that. Now, if we're stuck in dealing with this trauma, and that's where the dream is, just to get past that, the kid has to do that. As soon as you step up and you live a greater experience of your life, the kid has a different opportunity to do the same thing for them.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. Got a couple more questions left. Okay. How do you help teens and pre-teens build their self-esteem? Okay, teens.
Okay.
There's definitely something different in the brain of teens, so that everybody knows, there's different things happening.
Until a child, there's from about 9 to about 15, kids go through this phase where they just don't seem to understand what empathy is.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't understand a course of action and what the ramifications are for taking the wrong course of action.
And they don't understand that they don't have that fear so much. They're ready to take risks. They don't see it as risks. There's literally stuff going on in the brain that doesn't see it as risky.
Well, they haven't developed that part of the brain that allows them to understand the ramifications of their actions.
Mm-hmm. What was the question again?
Until after 15.
What was the question again? How do you help teens and pre-teens build their self-esteem? Yeah, okay.
So it's one of the things I would say to any parent is affirming to them, talking to them, chatting with them, letting them tap into how successful they are, not telling them they're successful, asking them to register with their feelings, asking them to get to know their feelings. We're taught so much in this world to ignore our feelings, and your feelings are a gauge. They're an exterior reference point. They're there to tell you when you're off track.
Mm-hmm.
When you're emotional, you're off track. If you're losing at a game, you're getting emotional. It's because you're not winning.
Mm-hmm.
So you're off track. So your emotions are there. They are going to tell you when you're off track, and you got to listen to them, and you got to get used to them, and you got to be able to understand them and what where they're trying to lead you and what they're trying to teach you. So I think getting your kids to understand their emotional states and not telling them not to feel things is important. And we all fuck up with that. I mean, I remember at one stage being so mad at Lexi and Lola. I was just like, just stop crying. I mean, I've just stop. I'm like, I've just fucking had it. I've had enough. And
how did that work out?
Well, Lola looked at Lexi and said, "Yeah, stop crying." And Lexi was like, I can't stop. I'm like, I just didn't fucking understand it. I was like, I just don't get why are you crying?
I think that
but so my point there is you get it wrong. It's okay. People just get it wrong. It's all right. But I would always go back to them and say, guys, I fucking shouldn't have done that. Don't worry, Dad. It's no. Listen, I just need to get it out. I'm feeling this. I shouldn't have done that, and it's not on you guys. That was on me, and that was Daddy's stuff, not your stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm being really open with them and having conversations with them, and letting them understand their emotions. I think is super important, because you can't shut down an emotion without shutting down value on yourself. Mm-hmm. If you shut down an emotion, you immediately shut down value on yourself, and you value your values are determined by your ability to navigate through what your emotions are telling you. You learn discipline by navigating through that emotional part of you that whispers to you and tells you, oh, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, you don't need to get out of bed this morning, oh, don't try your best, So those parts of you that are emotional, that part of you that goes, oh, you don't want to be you don't want to, you better not lose, and those things like that. They're there to help you understand the value of what's important to you.
I think that one of the things and one of the tips we've given over the years is being able to give words to where children can't have words and they don't have words. So when a kid is, like, obviously we're talking earlier years yet and now, but when the kid is young, they have feelings and emotions and they don't have words for that. You must be feeling sad right now. It seems like you're really confused and you're frustrated that I'm not giving you this or whatever, that this is not happening. So giving words to their feelings is super, super, super important. And you can do that even when they're older. And one of the things you demonstrate and you talk about is when Lexi came and gave you the picture and you told her how proud you were, and then she went away and she just came back 5 minutes later with another picture. And then once she does it again, you're like, well, hang on a second, she's looking for me to give her something that is not in me to give. It's got to be in her. And so you went down on your knee, pointed to her little chest and said, how are you feeling about this, Lexi? You must be feeling so proud. You must be, because then you give words to what's going on in there and you're pointing them back to themselves, right? So at any age you can do this with kids. You can give voice to the feelings and emotions that they may not have the words to be able to do. But on top of that, in terms of building self-esteem, the biggest issue that parents have with building self-esteem is that they perceive that they need to build their self-esteem. The self-esteem, kids have it anyway, but they have it in the areas of their values, not in the area of your values. And if I have a value on mathematics and patterns with numbers and stuff like that, and my kid is a dancer, my kid is going to have value and esteem in the area of their values of dancing. They may not have esteem in my area of mathematics, but I will say they've got low self-esteem because they're not doing well at school. So I will label that because because their values are different to mine. So just as a parent, I think it's a very important point that your kids have esteem and they have it in the area of their values. So you need to encourage. I think it's important to encourage them to have and to live their values to a greater degree, because every time they do that, they will realise that everyone's different. You can't judge everybody in the same way because everybody is a different human being. So that's a process, and that's very hard for teens and pre-teens to deal with in terms of feeling perhaps that they might be different from other people or different from how their friends are behaving or whatever, but their value is over here. And so they may be comparing themselves with other people who have esteem in different areas or different values that they do.
Yeah, and a cool way is when your kid exercises a quality in themselves, they point it out to them and say to them, you exercised really, really good restraint there, Lexi. You really exercised excellent restraint there. That's the quality of restraint, Lexi, and you're going to need that quality as you go through your life. So you have it now.
So you're giving words to them.
Yeah, so do you see then that you have restraint? You're able to exercise restraint. That was really disciplined of you, Lola. That's the quality of discipline. You have that quality of discipline. You're going to need to exercise that in your life. So do you understand that you have it?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question. We've got to move on. Okay, how do you help them navigate the world of social media and the insecurities they can develop? Okay. Ooh, big one.
Keep them away from it.
Keep them away from it as long as possible.
As much as you can, yeah.
I was reading a book and they were saying, your job is not to be their best friend. Your job is to parent, and your job as a parent is to keep them safe, and it's to keep them up until a certain age, to keep them emotionally and physically safe. I think that what you need to do is you have to really limit tech time, but that will grow with time, right? And
but it's not just
tech time.
Yeah.
I'm talking about tech in terms of any type of
Apps.
tech. I'm talking about apps. I'm talking about phones. I'm talking about TV. I'm talking about anything technology. So you limit it, and as they grow, they get more access to that. But social media is a beast in and of itself, and I think that we were talking the other day, Ange and I, because we were at I spent the weekend with Ange and Lex. And she was talking to another parent, and she was saying that we don't let our kids have phones. They have phones, and they're allowed us to do certain things, but there's definitely no social media, and they don't have phones that they take away and they use, Yeah. And this other parent was saying, I would love to have done that with my kids, but it didn't occur. And it, like Ange was saying about how the fact that it's her job not to her job is to help them to be a kid at the moment. Do you know what I mean? And and then as they grow, to have certain parameters around what they do. I remember my sister did an amazing job of that. She there was a time where she realised that the kids were ready. She gave them access. She had certain limitations, certain understanding about how they could communicate, and if there was any problems, what would happen, and what she laid out all of the rules so that they understood that it was a very it was a precious thing to be able to do that, and that would be taken away, or it wouldn't be. There would be ramifications for not using it properly. Do you know what I mean? Any sort of bullying, any sort of any of that sort of stuff, there would have been there were issues with that. So I think you've got to really navigate carefully. And while you can't say no to everything, I think you as a parent have to. My biggest thing is that you have to understand that you're not their best friend. They might not like you for some of the choices that you make, but I think that, again, communicating in terms of your values about why these choices are happening is super, super important, because, like, even your kids, they don't fuss about it. Do you know what I mean? They know that they're not. It's just a thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're given freedoms in other ways and in other areas, but there are certain things that there are restrictions around for their health, for their safety, and for because they're not themselves if they're stuck in there. But I think if you've got kids who are old enough to use social media, I think you have to keep an open line of communication. I think sometimes when you get to that point, it's the years that you've put in beforehand that really make a difference. And one of the I was listening to someone say the other day that one of the reasons that they don't, like, kids won't tell you what's going on in their social media world, and if something's happening, is they're afraid that they're going to have their phones or whatever, tablets, taken away from them. So you have to set up parameters that says that just because you're telling me this, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to use these things, so that you find ways that your kids can stay in open communication to you about whatever's happening. But that doesn't get set up. I mean, it can, but it doesn't really get set up when they're 16, 17 or 15. It gets set up in the years leading up to that. So I think you've got to I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think there's a very you have to be really clear about what is okay and what's not okay. Simon Sinek talks about. Sorry, Mitch. I know you're about to speak. Simon Sinek talks about that. You know, if you give if you give a kid alcohol before they're 16 and their brain is ready, right, they will more than likely turn to alcohol in their adult life when things get tough, right? Because social media, because what it does is it gives you this hit, so it gives you a way to handle it. And by the same token, social media, if you teach the kids that they can get the dopamine hit from a like or a follow or any of those things, then down the track that is going to impact them when they're older, just like an alcoholic, like a kid who got the alcohol before that time. They end up, the very high percentage of them turn into alcoholics because that's where they go to. Do you know what I mean? So, I just think it's a very important thing to manage. Yeah,
just manage it. Keep an eye on it. Make sure, they're not on any social media forums that are risky. I think we really monitor the amount of time that they have on things, and we also got to give them their time to be themselves, But we make sure. I mean, we live in a big paddock. We get them out, get them out of the house. Andrew's a little bit more lenient than I am. I'm pretty strict on it, But I'll sit and watch movies with them as well. I do all that sort of stuff, But I keep an eye on it.
Cool. All right, I think that was good. I love having questions to answer. Mind you, we talked a lot, but I like having questions to answer. We should do that again. Should do that again.
Yes.
Very good. I believe the children are a future.
Even if you live the most extraordinary life, there is always more to learn. This is why tens of thousands of people are using MJB Seminars techniques to hack their consciousness and bridge the gap from where they are to where they actually want to be.
MJB Seminars use cutting-edge transformational processes that are science-based and backed to help people break through subconscious barriers and limiting beliefs in order to reset, reboot, and live inspired. If you'd like to know more today, Google search MJB Seminars Bridge the Gap, click on the first link and watch the video.
Now, for simply watching the video, you will also receive a complimentary coaching session with one of our master coaches valued at over $600 to help you get traction in your life today. Remember, live life inspired.